computer. Okay, here we are on Wednesday, March 7, 2018. I believe this is session 3, is it? Session 3, I think. Yes, of the spring 2018 edition of the Storytelling Therapy video conference course. So the agenda for today is more life stories, and we can go over that article about narrative therapy and fairy tales and Harry Potter. But I wanted to begin by saying a few words about story formulas in general. You know, there are a lot of, I've noticed lately, a lot of people on the internet making recordings about storytelling and talking about story formulas. And the most famous and popular story formula is that there must be conflict in a story. There must be a struggle in a story. Sometimes it's formulated that there's exposition, which means kind of telling what's happened in the past, setting up the situation. Then the conflict comes to it builds and it comes to a crisis. And then we see what happens with the new situation after the big struggle, the big crisis. Many years ago in the USA, at least, this was called the formula for a well-made play or the well-written novel. And you know, it's probably true that there is often conflict in story, but I don't believe in forcing material into a formula. I believe that when we're formulating material and we're letting the material formulate itself, that we should not insist too soon, too fast, that it follow any formula. We have to, as things are coming up from our unconscious, we have to respect the material and say, you know, hello, who are you? What are you? How do you feel? What do you want? What do you want to say? Let's sit, let's have a cup of coffee, let's talk. You know, so you have a relationship with elements from your imagination and your unconscious, but you're not dictating that it should fit in a particular formula. So while I was thinking about this, I realized that great stories, we were just talking about the Harry Potter material, and we'll talk about that later. Great stories somehow speak to issues, questions, anxieties, hopes that are in the air at a certain time and place in society, in the evolution of society. If you're addressing a particular audience, it will speak to particular conditions that are being faced by that audience. If you're working just in relation to the general public, you know, you're making a movie for global distribution, somehow what you're doing needs to grapple with the cultural circumstances of the world today. It has to face those issues and address those issues and help people think about those issues. So there's no easy formula for you know, discovering and expressing and you know, portraying through metaphor, through character, for representing the important questions in the world today. There's no easy answer for that. All we can do is you know, feel it and think it and then discuss it with ourselves and with other people. So so I just wanted to say that because I'm seeing so many experts, story experts, say it's all just about conflict and struggle. And I wanted to add that really the essential thing is this thing of facing the issues of the day, consciously or unconsciously, and that there's no easy formula for this. Would anyone like to add anything or disagree or somehow follow up on what I'm saying?
Depends what you're using story for in terms of formula. But if it's straight therapy, then you have to have a conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a story. In terms of conversation, telling a story doesn't need a structure unless there's a reason behind it, I don't think.
Well, when we're using story for therapy with a client, whether we're formulating the stories or the client is formulating the stories, obviously the stories have to grapple with conditions that the client is going through in the here and now. These stories that we work with, in addition to the life story and the chapters of the client's life story, whatever other stories come up, clearly are going to address issues that the client is going through, perhaps in metaphorical form. Does that make sense, Bronwyn?
It does.
So it's a very delicate thing to find the right story for oneself, for one's audience, for the general public. You have to think it and feel it. And we can only use ourselves as the guinea pig. We know when metaphorically speaking, we get goosebumps, or metaphorically speaking, our hair stands up on the back of our neck. We get a feeling of connection, that this is something real, this is something interesting, this is something solid that will make an impact, that will connect with the individual or with the group. But we can only monitor our own feelings about this, and of course discuss it with other people. But primarily it's about one's own feelings. The world of publication, of plays, novels, is full of people who ended up being considered great writers of great literature, whose work was rejected by many, many people, many, many times. But because they had a belief in the validity and strength of the material, they were persistent, and it finally got out and became part of the public, sometimes the global public discourse.
Eric,
okay? Go ahead.
Well, I agree with the fact that yes, it's the flow of what you're thinking about the story, how you connect with the story and present. I do also believe that when we talk about stories, and when I, as a narrator, talk about a particular story, and you, as a listener, connect with it, the understanding and the relevancy of that story could be different. So the intent at which I might be talking about the story, the intent at which you would be receiving the story could be different also.
Yeah, for every individual listener or every individual reader, each person receives it differently, takes it and feels it differently.
So how do you look at constructing a story that conveys the message that is required? Do one need to think through that, or it is to let the audience or the person who's listening to be on his own free will to pick what he or she understands out of that and believe that yes, it transforms them?
Yeah, well, of course, finally the listener decides how much it has touched them, moved them, how much they want to pay for it, as a book or as a recording or as a movie. People speak with their pocketbooks to some degree.
Can I add something to what you said? Really, I agree with the fact of not putting boxes to fill to the client, not have a formula already made, because that would break the free association in thoughts. Because when somebody tells his life, it's not just information. He's discovering in the same time than he's talking.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
I really agree with that. And also, you just answered to a question I had after having read the article. I was wondering if from an era to another era in time, the children needs would be different, or the children they need to hear, the stories they need to hear would be different. And actually, Harry Potter had a great success. Because I was thinking, my question was, but nowadays children, do they need to hear the Sleeping Beauty or things like that? Or maybe they are already very encouraged, I mean, in Western countries, to be autonomous, independent very early, even too early. They have to choose things. They have to choose what they want to do in the life very early. So I was wondering that, but the answer would be more that the needs are all the time the same, because Harry Potter is talking about choices. It's some young boy who has to make choices between the easy road or the integrity and faithfulness to what he believes and loves. So, and he has to take decisions. So, and the great success to me speak about the fact that children still need some encouragement to decide and assert themselves, even if they are asked so many choices to what they want to eat tonight, what they want to wear, what they want to do, where they want to go in vacation. We ask children all those things, and sometimes it's tiring because they can't just follow and enjoy. They have to think too early sometimes. But the real need is the same, maybe through all the times.
Yes.
I don't know if I was clear.
Yes. Well, I think great stories are timeless in a way, because all great stories grapple with basic archetypal emotions and situations of, growing up, developing a self, struggling for good things, struggling against bad things. But stories grow up in particular cultural situations. The famous European fairy tales grew up in a situation where there actually were kings and queens. There were castles, there were palaces, there were forests, there were foxes and wolves in the forests. So the fantasy that was added to those stories, that the fox or the wolf could talk and such like that, it took a real life situation, and which was common to many people, and added the imagination. Now today, for most people in the world, a king, a queen, a palace, even a forest is not part of our daily experience. So when we hear those stories, we are twice removed from that reality. It's not just fantasy has been added, but the very idea of a forest is a fantasy for most of us, because we don't get to be near it most of the time. So somehow, to take Harry Potter as an example, she, took the modern situation of London and the London train station and a certain track they have to go to a track number 9 3/4 to take the train to that school. So of course, just like in Chennai, there is no track 9 3/4. There's track 8, 9, and 10. So so we understand that 9 3/4 is something halfway in between and sort of a fantasy, but somehow the Harry Potter material spoke to a need for fantasy, for the love of magic, the love of the idea of being able to transform matter through magic, and it has been such a universal success. I used to think that Harry Potter might be more popular in the West, where the West tends to be more secular, and I used to joke with people, or people used to joke with me, that in India, every day is Halloween. Everywhere is a magical school here, because so many people are involved with so many different religious and spiritual practices that there's no. The idea was that there's no need for Halloween here, or there's no need for Harry Potter. But I think as India has become more more developed, there is also a need for this kind of fantasy here also.
Developed, or the opposite of developed?
Mm-hmm.
In the regarding to the imagination and fantasy world and
Mm-hmm.
magic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so shall we? Let's see. Shall we go on to the article, or shall we go on to life story? Well, does anyone have a suggestion, or should we do one and then the other?
Can I share one experience?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
In my works groups with story, the first thing I propose we do is 2 people together tell one child story, each one, and the one listen and write and recreate the story, and the propose is that each one recreate a story with a compassive eyes, and transform the people in the hero in his or her story.
Mm-hmm.
Could you understand what I say?
Yes, the last few words I didn't get, but I hear you're talking about transforming stories.
With a compassive eyes, and it's kind of big to listen your own story with other telling with other eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful, and it's happening in our first meeting, and create a beautiful atmosphere. It's very good, and we didn't use any formula to this.
Good.
It's free. How create? It's free. It's a very interesting experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is it?
So are you beginning with people's stories about their experiences, or they can tell any story? They can tell a fantasy, they can tell their favorite, any story.
Some child story.
Aha, children's stories. Mm-hmm.
Yes, one story about our childhood.
Mm-hmm. Oh, about one's childhood.
Your own time.
Something that happened in my childhood. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Okay, so let me say a few words about this article, and then anyone else also join in. It is really about narrative therapy, which is a particular form of storytelling therapy, founded and developed especially in Australia. I think the leading center is called the Dulwich Center. I'm not sure what city it's in, but the founder has passed away, but his students are busy at work. And from what I understand about narrative therapy, it is not so oriented towards psychoanalysis. It is not so oriented towards looking at your unconscious. What it is about is seeing how you see your life story, and then seeing if you can see it in a more constructive, productive way. There's a lot of talk about re-authoring your life story. In other words, when you first tell it, you might tell it in a certain way, and you might tell it where you suffered a lot, and there were a lot of difficulties. And then the therapist would coach you to see it in other ways, including that, well, you survived it, didn't you? You had coping mechanisms. You had resiliency. So then to understand one's own coping mechanisms and have confidence and joy in one's coping mechanisms and know that you can use them again. That seems to be one of the ideas in narrative therapy. There's a lot of talk about externalizing the problems. And what I relate to is the idea of externalizing the entire story. And the simplest way to externalize one's own experience and one's life story is just to retell it using the third person. Instead of saying, I did such and such, say, she did. There was a character who did such and such. That gives you the distance from it, and you can look at it in a cool, objective way, and it opens the door that you can make changes, you can add fantasy. So that is a way of externalizing not just the problems, but all aspects of one's experience. And I think it's fun sometimes. It's a good way to play, to externalize one's experience. I thought I would give an example of how one can re-author. Another term for re-authoring experience, I think, is to practice life story repair. Have I mentioned that term before? Repairing your life story, or helping your client repair.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, like if a motorcycle breaks down, it needs repair. If an air conditioner breaks down, it needs repair. If your life story doesn't feel good, if one is depressed or confused, maybe you can repair your life story so it will once again make sense and be inspirational to you. So what this means, one metaphor that comes to me for re-authoring a life story or repairing your life story is to, if one is captain of a ship and the ship is blown off course, or it's blown for many days by a storm, high wind and high waves, and the captain doesn't even know where the ship is anymore. What the captain has to do is reorient him or herself In the old days, captains could navigate by the stars. With the help of tools and materials, they could, by looking at the stars, they could know where they were. And then they would have to rechart a course to their desired destination. So recharting a course to one's desired destination or to a new destination. That is a metaphor to me for reauthoring a story. So let me give an example. Let us say that I suddenly realize that I am gay, that I am homosexual. Now, that can, for many people, that can really shake and shatter one's identity and existence. Of course, many people who come to that realization, they've known it for a long time. But maybe finally I've decided I'm going to stop fighting it. I'm going to stop repressing it. I'm going to stop keeping it a secret. I'm going to come out to myself and to the world. So you know what might happen, right? My family might disown me. My mother and father might call me bad names. My so-called friends might call me bad names. Society might call me, sick. And that can be the story of my life, that I am sick. I am a monster. I am a freak. And then what can I do? What should I do? Should I kill myself? Should I try to change? If someone's in a position like that, that is a bad situation. But then if you want to say, if I want to change the story, if I want to reauthor the story, I can say, I do not accept that I'm sick. Many millions of people have been homosexual throughout history. Many great people, many geniuses have been homosexuals. Many people who created, works of literature and art and science that society is built upon have been homosexuals. And what's more, homosexuals have their own culture and their own communities. Maybe my parents are worried about me because they think I will grow old alone, that I will be rejected by everybody. And it's true, I might be rejected by their society, but it's sort of a secret. There is a society of homosexual men in most major cities. There is a society of homosexual women. There are societies of transgender people. And they give support to each other. And they have a whole, social and economic other world that people don't know about if they are not in that subculture. So if I want to reauthor my story is I am different, and I am finding people who are similar to me, and I'm going to live a happy and productive life in my subculture. And if people in the other culture don't like it, my job is just to protect myself against them, to avoid them, maybe try to win them over. If I can't win them over, at least I have to ignore them or protect myself against them. But that is a much better state of mind for me than thinking I am just that I'm just sick. So I present that as an example of changing one's identity, changing one's story from being a sick person to being a different person who is strong, who is healthy, who is developing a new identity in a new subculture. And it is very much a reversal and a rejection of the original story. Any comments or questions or additions? This is about the idea of reauthoring one's life story. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have two things to add. The first thing is that while you were talking about this coming out. Or what we are really trying to address is that it is a matter of acceptance in society. And there was this very beautiful story. It's a very short one. I would, if I can just share it. It's about this elephant in the forest, the baby elephant, which is born blue in color, and everybody shuns him, saying that, oh, you're blue, you are not, yeah, you're not gray. And all the animals, they shun him, and then he goes out into the city, and then he understands that people wear different clothes, and it's just a garb, it's just a color, and you can change it. And then he comes back to his mother, who's waiting for him, and she says that, I accept you as you are, because the person inside you is no different from me and everybody else. So that's one thing which I kind of remembered while you were talking about being accepted as a part of society, or understanding that there is a secret place where you definitely have a place. That was one thing. The second part is something which is to do with my field. So we are actually trying to understand this process of coming out, and there is this beautiful dance piece which is in classical Bharatanatyam, which we are kind of me and my teacher, we're trying to bring out. So maybe in future I'll share it with you all, and you can let us know how narrative it is, because it's only music and it's just a 2-minute piece about a daughter telling her mother that she is not interested in dressing up, and how she wants to overcome the scenario, and she just wants to be as she is. So yeah, that's the second thing. So maybe in future, maybe in 2 weeks from now.
This is a Bharatanatyam style dance performance.
This is me and my teacher. We are trying to do this.
Please.
It's a very, very small scale thing, but it has no words. It's just only the expression of the narration is only through the face and gestures, what we call as abhinayam. And it's just a very 2-minute musical. We are trying to find our ground somewhere in expression this way. So
yes, please do that with facial expressions, with mudras, and even if you have enough space in your room, please stand up and back up and do it full body. We want to not just be talking heads in this medium of video conferencing. We want to use our full body. So especially you and I have this interest in dance and movement.
I would like to do that. Yes, please. I would like to do that. Maybe
Wonderful.
Not today, because we just started.
Yes.
But maybe a few weeks from now, when all of you are okay with it. It's just a 2-minute piece.
Sure.
And it's still, I need to polish it, but I want to show it to you all, because I want to get feedback from you all.
The main challenge and limitation I see in standing up and backing up and letting our full body be in the screen is that we will be away from the computer, so our voice will not be picked up properly unless you have an external microphone.
Yes.
But for some time, I think it's okay that we won't be able to speak, we won't be able to be heard. So that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. Any other thoughts about repairing? Oh, I was going to say my wife Magdalene is a psychological counselor who especially works with gay people, and she has said it's been obvious over the years. The big shift has been 20 years ago, if someone came to a therapist in relation to being gay, the question was, what's wrong with me? How can I escape this fate of being gay? But now the big problem is, how can I make peace with my mother and father? How can I help them understand and accept who I am? So there's been a total shift from how can I change myself? Now the question is, how can I change society? Because I still love my mother and father, and I don't want to totally lose them. But they are cutting themselves off from me. Is there any way I can help them adjust? And so my wife will then, often she has video conference sessions with, the young person is in Chennai, or the the young person is in America, and the mother and father are in Mother A. So she does these video conference sessions trying to help the parents change and reconcile themselves to the new reality. And often what comes out, as I say, is that the parents are worried that their child will end up being alone because the child is not going to, have a spouse of the opposite sex. The child maybe is not going to have children. So when the parent realizes that there is a subculture and a community that the child can be a part of, often that makes the parent feel much, much better. I'm sorry, Sid, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add on to what you're talking about. When I was reading the article, as well as when we spoke about now reauthoring that we spoke about, I was connecting it to one of the psychology sessions that I went through with regard to transaction analysis, where we call something called as the rescripting, the script of our life, and if you want to change, and the story that or the situation scenario that you spoke about so beautifully is about how do you overcome a particular situation, and then you try to build your own story or reauthor it, which is like changing your belief, changing your value, looking at what realities you're looking in right now, and what best that you can create. So it's basically, when I read this story about the article, more I was connecting is how do you change that belief? How do you bring that change in the value system that you want to create in the current reality?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's keep that question in mind. Let's go to share screen for a minute, and I have the article on the page. Let's see if I can get it there where you can see it. Okay, do you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to scroll down. I put parts in blue that were interesting to me. See, we can recognize themes and integrate them into our own lives. So we can recognize themes from the other stories. Individuals make sense of their lives through cultural narratives of their environment and their personal narratives. So, of course, we are very affected by the narratives of the dominant culture, and sometimes we have to reject those narratives. So, the past is not seen as fixed and irreversible, but is based on our interpretation of events. So in other words, something that seemed like a disaster in the past, under a new perspective, that disaster may have been a gateway to growth and new realizations, and may have been a necessary step in a constructive process. So we are constantly reevaluating what happened in the past and seeing it in different ways. Okay, reauthoring. We can rework our narratives. We can transform a disabling and restrictive narrative into one that is full of hope and possibilities. These narrative therapy people, they really talk a lot about problems. And they say their big catchphrase is, "You are not the problem is the problem." So I agree, but I would also add, you are not the problem, you are not the solution, you are not anything. Or the problem is in you, the solution is within you, it's all within you. So that's why I recommend externalizing and objectifying your entire story, to be able to step back and look at the entire story, not just the so-called negative parts. They're talking about unique outcomes of positive things, and their idea is to build upon these positives and change your perception of your life story by building up positives. I can't give any examples of this, but let's just go on. A life becomes meaningful when you see yourself as an actor within the context of a story, a cultural tale, a religious narrative, a family saga, the development of science, a political movement. Our life becomes meaningful when we see ourselves in such a story. Early in life, we are free to choose what story we will inhabit, and later we find that we have been lived by that story. It's an interesting reversal. We have been lived by a story. Okay, fairy tales. We'll talk more about fairy tales in future sessions. The author of this article finds three things in fairy tales especially. Gaining autonomy and becoming more independent, dealing with parental absence. Oh, by the way, I was going to say about children's literature, I was told by an excellent storyteller and writer for children the other day that the first thing that a story worker for children often does is get rid of the parents. Because he said that for children to have a real adventure and have room to grow, you have to get rid of the parents. Or you have to take the children in an environment where the parents are not there. So that was pretty shocking for me. But
I completely agree. I completely agree to that.
But I'm a parent, and I don't want my 10-year-old daughter taken away from me.
In fact, even I in my classes, I in particular tell the parents to stay away from the place where the children are learning, because I feel that their intrusion is so much.
Yeah, but like
in the sense
yeah, go ahead. In the sense,
the reason being, what I feel as a teacher of performing arts is that when there is an onlooker of any sort, the child has an inherent reason to show or do it for that person or for that onlooker, and the child has to overcome that, and that is when the stage fear builds.
Okay, so
even in my classes.
So you're talking about in the classroom. But this man I was talking to was speaking of in the actual stories, the parents have to be killed off, or the parents have to be such ridiculous, stupid people that they have to be left behind, or they have to be ignored. Or look what happens in Harry Potter: the parents die, right? And then the whole adventure is the child avenging that death, or dealing with Voldemort who killed the parent. My daughter the other day asked to get a copy, an audio copy of a story called Matilda by what is his name? He also wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Roald Dahl.
Yes, yes. Has anyone come across the story Matilda?
Yes.
I hear it's beautifully written and a wonderful story, but it seems that the father and the mother are just total jerks. So I'm getting the feeling that these professional writers, they are like trying to steal our children away from us and turn our children against us. But I guess I shouldn't.
Can I ask you
the story?
Yeah.
So was the teacher in the story.
Yeah, the teachers usually are also, the teachers are usually mean also.
That's right.
Oh, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I guess when the parents are in the stories, all the bad sides are exaggerated. And it's also because in every relationship there is love, but there is hate. Even from parents to children, even the opposite. Sometimes you can't bear your own child, and you don't have to feel guilty about that. It's human relationship, and sometimes that can be maybe less pressure for the child if in a story the parent is, with exaggerate things that we can be angry or revolted against, because in the real life it happens also, but child can't allow himself to, a young child, not teenagers. And also what you said in the beginning, so nobody told that parents are stupid or worth to be left aside. But you said you don't want your daughter be taken away from you. But when you were a child, really, you wanted your parents always with you? Really?
It's true. Well, often in especially in traditional stories like fairy tales, there is a very good parental figure like a fairy godmother, and then a very bad one like a witch who wants to kill and eat the children. So the child. What were you going to say? The good one?
No, both are. That can be two sides of the same person.
Yes, yes, and these fairy tales specialize in
the real life.
They specialize in projecting good onto one character and bad onto another. Usually it's the older sister who's bad, younger sister who's good, stepmother who's bad, real mother who's good. So in real life, as you say, we are all a mix. But these type of stories do a split into two characters, and then the two characters have to fight against each other, or the child has to deal with both characters.
I see that even in sorry.
Go ahead.
I see that even in Indian mythology, where there is always a positive and the negative side of a sister and a elder sister and a younger sister. Lakshmi, for that example. So it says that Lakshmi's elder sister is considered to be very inauspicious, and the moment she enters the house, it's considered to be very bad. While when Lakshmi leaves, the Lakshmi sister leaves and Lakshmi enters, it becomes nice. So I think even in mythology, it's been there. Like what Crystal said, it could be the same person's different sides, which is portrayed as two different characters altogether.
Yes. So many of the narrative and story elements by which we live are deep within our unconscious and are connected with great myths and fairy tales that we have heard since we were children. The main character in a fairy tale often has lost a parent. When the character has difficulties, she manages to gain confidence and become independent on some level. And it's true. Fairy tales are coming-of-age stories. They generally end with the young person has found a spouse and a treasure and is about to get married and is going to theoretically live happily ever after. So it's a story about a child who becomes a teenager and then is set for life. In those days when these stories were composed, almost everyone who was going to get married as a teenager. So people didn't live as long, and they had their childhood, and then they got married. So fairy tales are stories about becoming, to some degree, oneself and an independent person, as well as the child of a parent. So that's why these stories sometimes deal with the death of a parent. Go ahead. Yes?
Yes, I actually have a thought here. It's just coming off my head. What I'm saying is, in the portrayal in the fairy tale and the fantasy, it's kind of everything has a sad background, correct? Like there's no parent, there's no security, the person is vulnerable, correct? So
okay, yeah.
Is this in any way a sort of giving some kind of a like a cushion that there is hope there are worse scenarios and you're better off when you kind of, when I'm talking about when somebody is correlating their story with a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the idea behind it?
I think that's one that can be one level, especially people telling grandmother stories to children. Children can realize that somebody had it worse off than me. That may be part of the comforting and
because to me, I feel that it's more of pathos, and I kind of seeing it that way, when these blue lines which are I'm reading right now, it feels as if you kind of feel better off than what's already there and what's already written.
Yeah, but
Like
it's also inspirational, because even though they do have these difficulties of being an orphan or being lost or being poor, usually by the end of the story they overcome the problem.
Yes.
And they overcome it for one reason. They overcome it because they are kind and good, and they do kind and good things. Yes, let me just finish. They do kind and good things. They respect old people. They respect animals. They learn an animal language. So they are kind and generous. And then Mother Nature is kind and generous back to them, and snap, they have their wonderful spouse and treasure. So it's the kindness that saves the fairy tale hero or heroine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing which I think is, it's also to make the reader feel that he or she is not alone in this world. I mean, the moment you feel that there is somebody else who's going through something similar to you, or even, worse situations than you, the first thing you get is out of that is, I'm not alone in this world. So I think making you feel that you're not alone itself is a step towards, healing. So
Yes.
Could be that as well.
Yes, these stories and also Proverbs, they remind us that many people or many characters have faced a similar problem. And our culture, our society is familiar with this problem. And the culture has many suggestions on how to handle the problem. So we are not alone in the sense that, yes, Cinderella also experienced this, but also we are not alone because so many people have been telling the story of Cinderella and thinking and talking about Cinderella. So that again tells us that that we are not alone. There's a community of people who have been thinking about as well as experiencing similar things. So let's just take a look at this last quote, which I've known for many years, and I enjoy it. Stories are habitations. They are like buildings. We live in them. They hold us together. They keep us apart. We inhabit the great stories of our culture. We live through stories. Again, we are lived by the story of our race and place. We are, each of us, locations where the stories of our place and time become partially tellable. But again, it's up to each individual to accept or reject the dominant cultural stories that we're born into, both the mythological stories, the political stories, the national stories. Each individual has to make their own choices. Okay?
Yeah.
So now let's actually go on to a little bit of storytelling. I have to take away this share. Let's see, how do I, okay, stop share. Okay, there we are back again. Okay, will anyone tell us a life story?
But before that, I just have to tell you, my power just went off, which is why I got disconnected. So I might get disconnected again when the power is coming back.
Okay.
So if I get disconnected, I'll reconnect.
That's fine. And we are recording it, so so you can see the recording later. So are you saying you do not want to tell your life story today then, because of those conditions?
I think so.
Good.
Told already.
She told us, right?
I already did.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Forgive me. Okay, who else? I think we have time for 2 stories today.
Yeah.
And I will tell my story at some point, but I think you all should have a chance before me because I've been talking too much.
Hmm.
Okay, I can try, maybe.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I did not prepare. So I was born in a family where knowledge and science and studies were encouraged and encouraged. And and I also was very interested in know why things happen. I asked a lot of questions, and I had a lot of questions about the first time I've heard about psychoanalysis. Analysis was in philosophy class, so I was 16 and 17 years old. And then I studied psychology. But in the first place, I was really in front of patients. I felt really helpless sometimes, even with all the theory. And so how can I say? I kind of get used to that kind of uncomfort. That is an uncomfort that is always there when I meet somebody, actually. But I think it's also part of it, and maybe part of the meeting. But I've started rediscover things that actually I enjoyed when I was very young before school, like stories, like painting, colors. And so those things I progressively kind of rediscovered, and that made me feel very better. And first, it was thanks to my grandmother, because she is very interested in India, all Indian culture, yoga, and a lot of things, and also astrology. And it helped me a lot speaking with her during my, not teenage time, but when I was 20, 25, because now I'm 33 now. Because my grandmother, she managed to, because of her interest in astrology, she speaks about the universe and the planets like it's beings, they are like, they have a personality, like Jupiter is like that. So, and I found it very wonderful to see the world, the things that science said, oh, it's only stones or that, or I don't know, like with a personality, something really alive in a way. So I was happy with that. And then I did a training for my psychologist job. It was how to use the storytelling to help people with Alzheimer's disease. So I did that training. I enjoyed, and I organized that in my job. It was every week, and stories and some songs and some cooking recipes. So all kind of things to make the speech circulate in the circle. So even if I was mainly the main person speaking, because those people, they don't speak, they have lost some abilities to speak, but some reactions, some laughs. So it was very nice to see that. And also dance, I rediscover in a way the Indian classical dance. And I used to do that when I was also very young. Then I quit because I was a teenager, and I did not want to have some can I say? I wanted to be free. I did not want to go every Tuesday at the class. So those things progressively, I don't know, I kind of rediscovered them. And also a training that somebody advised me to do, like your course, Eric, somebody advised me to do. No, but I mean, I'm free, but those are ideas that came from other people. Why don't you do that? And that's an idea in my head. It's just a proposition. So I did also that art therapy course, and the colors are also considered like beings with the nature, with a movement that is really inside them. It's not something that is blue. It's the blue that is that way, that characteristics. So to finish that training in art therapy, I came to India because also I had that idea in my head. I don't know why, because in my family they are not particularly attracted by the Eastern culture. But I had this idea in my head, so I wanted to go to India. So I spent more than 1 year because I've met my boyfriend here. So I spent more time than planned. And so I also discovered yoga and how it's pleasant for the body to move in that way. So I have these things, it's a bit scattered. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with all that. So I'm going back to France in 2 months. So I don't know. I'm at a point where I kind of, I don't know, the life is like not linear. So my life was like going up like a child, having more things. And then the actual science and even lots of things around psychology are like taking out the life of things. And I was happy to discover it even in the movement. And now I don't know what I'm gonna do when I'm back, when I will be back. Being psychologist in some institution, it's becomes more and more tough because the doctors, they make their laws and you have to do a lot of evaluations and testing, and I don't think that helps somebody to tell him that he is a dark mark. So I mean, testing, there is no point. Just the doctors, they are happy because they have a figure and it's a number, and yeah, it's work. So I don't want to do that. So I can do that, but not 5 days a week. So I don't know but I like working with old people because it's so interesting the way they look back to their lives and their families. Very interesting. So I don't know if I'm doing that. So I have also that therapeutic skill that I can practice with that. I don't know. I'm also interested in yoga, so I will do a little small course to how to bring yoga for children, because I think they will have a lot of benefits with learning how to breathe, and they are very. I don't know in India. I did not see a lot of children, but in France they always have the screen, Mm-hmm. So yoga will be good, I think, also. So I don't know what I'm doing with all that.
Wonderful.
So I'm
Okay.
new beginning of.
A new beginning. Yes, okay, well, what I'm hearing is very much a story of integration, that you are integrating, many different states of mind and cultural approaches. You felt that the psychology training took the life out of things to some degree, but I'm sure it was also valuable on certain levels. And you are integrating certain approaches from India with certain approaches from France, and a very striking term and concept that you used a number of times was you have been rediscovering what your love of play, your love of art, your comfort with yourself, your sense of freedom, right? I mean, many people have the story, maybe it's a universal human story, that as children, we had a golden childhood. Or we have a dream, a fantasy of a golden childhood where we could play and we were free. And then we had certain responsibilities and we were, through school and through employment, we were forced to be more methodical and cold. So you are telling the story of trying to recover from that methodical, cold mentality, and to integrate it with art, with physicality, with certain elements from Indian culture. Is that true? Maybe.
Yeah, I will think of that. What I am rediscovering, something I've read recently about that philosopher German, Rudolf Steiner, and he said the difference, a child is happy to play, and then the real life, the work, like a big burden. So how can we, I don't know, improve that gap? And he said, if you watch, we can't teach a child that life is a game, because otherwise he will take nothing seriously. But if you look attentively a child playing, he is very serious in his game.
Yeah.
So he's engaged. He's really committed in the game.
That sense of involvement, being in the zone, as people say, in the flow, not being alienated, not being detached. So maybe that sense of involvement is something that you are trying to rediscover for yourself, and also for people you would be working with.
Maybe.
Okay. You know, as individuals, we tend to have this narrative of, when I was a child, I was free. And also, many nations, many communities also have a similar narrative, that we had a golden age long, long ago where things were so wonderful. But now, because of certain conditions, things have gone corrupt or some problem. But once upon a time, in our golden age, life was really fantastic. And it may be true.
To make my life great again.
Yes, we are here to make it great again. Even Donald Trump is here to make America great again. But many countries, for good or for worse, talk about rediscovering the golden age of the past. In some cases, it's a total fantasy, but in some cases, there's some reality to it. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. Can we have? Did somebody else do you want to add anything, or does anyone else want to add anything about Christelle's?
Yeah,
yes, go ahead.
Yes, I want to add something. As she was telling what she was saying, I had this image in my mind about this, this clay. In Tamil Nadu, they make these bommais we call them the dolls. We call them bommai. They make it for Navratris, and at that time, the mud that is taken is from different places, and every place has got some goodness to the sand, the mud, the clay. And then they make and congregate it into something which is so beautiful, like a doll which is placed during the Golu, or the how do I explain Golu? It's like a celebration where they place all the different dolls, and then it's like a 9 days of celebration that we have in the month of October. So when she was telling this, in my mind I was thinking, she's got these expertise from different places. She's like this mud which has got its own properties, and she's going to congregate it into something beautiful like a doll, and she's going to place it somewhere wherever she goes. So that's what's been in my mind, talking about.
So it's an act of creation, An act of self-creation.
Yeah, something like that. Yes, yes, yeah. That's the word, correct.
Great metaphor. Great metaphor. Very nice.
Okay. Anyone else?
I promise to do this next week.
Okay.
Not me this time.
Well, then you're going to force me. Oh, go ahead, Sid. Will you?
Yep,
Go
I
ahead.
can share my story.
And we can go a few minutes over, right? Just a few minutes over.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
Definitely.
Sid.
Starting has always been a problem, and I think my childhood also holds the same story of getting started a little slow. Not much except for the pranks that happen in school, trying to explore things. Studies was primary, and getting to do different areas. But yes, I realize when I do a throwback of my childhood, I realize that I also used to do things which are not an open. For example, I used to paint a sketch. I used to get lost in the woods in my school, but quite discreetly. Nobody would know that I've done that. For any of the pranks where my classmates used to get caught in the school, the mastermind would be way back, sitting in the back benches and trying to do things. Uh, but it got more quietened up as I grew up into my college days. Studies took primary focus, where I was not catching on to what I wanted to do, and it so happened that when I started my profession, job was the only engagement that I had, and not much that I was doing from exploring things. I actually quietened out a lot. In college days, I used to write, and I stopped writing. I stopped doing anything of those lines. Of post marriage, and when I had my kid, that's where I saw a turn in me, and it was a very beautiful turn. Um, and I do. I started to explore different places in and around Chennai to begin with, and I've been in Chennai, the southern part of the country, for the last 18 years now. Though being from the eastern part of the country, I got settled down here from a job perspective, and I've been here. So when I started exploring places in Chennai, there was something that came back to me as if telling me, just go exploring. And my partner in crime, my wife, and I, she is an explorer herself, wanderer, I would say. And we both got together to explore quite a bit. And when my son was hardly 3 months old, we took our first trip. We drove down to a place, and that was just the beginning. Today, if you ask me, I'm an ardent fan of this country, and I really mean that. The reason is I find this country so beautiful, so enriching, both from a cultural point of view, architectural point of view, historical point of view, spiritual point of view, that I don't think so one lifetime would ever even suffice, or many lifetimes would also not suffice to find what this country holds. And I have made it a point, or rather we have made it a point, that every year, at least there are 2 trips every half a year that we would go out, drive down somewhere, we go somewhere, explore this country in the way that we would love to, not to the usual places where people go to. And that was just the beginning, where I realized that there is so much that I can actually contribute and build myself into. Happened to pick up a camera, and that became the second companion for me. Started doing photography. Got into a little bit of serious photography, but that is now also not as serious. But whenever I travel, that's another. So shooting architecture, shooting nature, that's become the point that I keep doing and exploring myself in through my camera. that got added on. So I got back my mojo to write, and I've started writing my blogs. I started exploring as to how I could express myself and be more open. And this whole thing actually led me to start a journey of discovering who am I, and what am I doing in this world? What's the purpose that I'm looking out for? And that has still there's a long way to go. There's much more discovery to be done. I just found a speck of myself in the way of writing, in the way of photography, in the way of exploring nature, in the way of exploring this country. And I feel grateful that yes, I was able to publish a book last year. That became a big high for me when I did that. So job has today become a part of my life, yes. But what is becoming more and more interesting is that the other aspect of me, which is always curious to explore, curious to learn, curious to express in different ways and means, is becoming very strong. So I see myself as a wanderer. I see myself as an explorer of newer aspects of me, and I'm becoming a strong believer that if I change myself, things around me change, and that's what I'm trying to do and trying to see how I can take this and make an impact for myself so that I can start making impact for others. So that's about me and my story so far.
Wonderful. And I hope this workshop, this course, is part of the process. I hope it will be.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Yes, very much. It's helping me to explore other aspects of how narrative and how expressive one can get, which is adding to myself.
One striking aspect of your story is the sense that what you're doing is a little bit forbidden, in the sense that we are expected just to follow the path that everyone else follows and not question too many things and not go off the beaten path.
Yeah.
But you even use the term "my partner in crime," as if it's a crime to explore and go off on your own. And there is a certain truth to it, because every society sets certain guidelines and limits for us. And if we go beyond those limits, we are transgressors. So you are judiciously, discreetly at times doing that, and a bit of a revolutionary in possibly facilitating others to do it also.
Yes.
Excellent. Yes.
Thank you.
Lavanya.
So I clearly saw How to Train the Dragon movie coming in front of my eyes. So
good one.
Yeah. So I was just thinking Sid, and then thinking that the Toothless, and I mean the movie just fell in place for me when I was hearing.
I haven't seen the movie. Can you very briefly explain how it relates to Sid?
Yes, it's a Viking group, and this boy does not like to hurt the dragons. The Vikings are going off to hurt the dragons, and he tries to go discreetly.
No,
not now.
Can anyone else carry on? Has anyone else seen the movie? Go ahead, continue.
Yes, I am an ardent animation fan. So yeah, so the movie goes this way, and he finds that it doesn't interest him, and he feels bad. In fact, when his father, who's the head of the Viking group, goes on to hunt for dragons. And very secretly, he finds this dragon which is hurt, and this is one of the fiercest one, which is one of the most angry dragon, and it's called
Fury.
Night
Fury.
Night Fury, correct. And then he kind of builds a friendship with this dragon, and very in the he kind of I mean, it's the kind of a win-win situation, because he's very thin, he's not less the well built like a Viking, he's not strong and all that, and even this dragon has got a disability, so he kind of relates himself with the dragon, and they both become inseparable. And it's about how he and the dragon together make his own people understand that we can live in harmony with the creatures around us, and he makes them fall in love with dragons and not hunt them. That's the movie. It's a beautiful movie, beautiful.
So how might that relate to what Sid was saying?
I think I think Lavanya would be better place to say it. But then, as I see it, I think this is something, because doing something which is not what the society wants you to do, and finding a space within, and best of all, finding peace with it, making peace with what you want to do, and also accommodating it with the society. I think that's the whole
and
point.
Society changes.
Correct.
Society changes.
Yes, that's true. That's
Wonderful.
True. Can I say something?
Of course.
Can I say something? Okay, there's when I was in school, I used to read a lot. I still read a lot. I read this book called Wanderlust from Daniel Steele. Has anybody read that?
What is the name?
Wanderlust. It's a Daniel Steele. I think it's Daniel Steele. Exactly, it's just Daniel Steele. It's called Wanderlust, and for me, images from that book was coming on when Sid was talking.
No.
Great. Well, I'm. Oh, go ahead, somebody.
Excuse me, Sid. I saw you wrote a book. I did not get it really.
Yes, I authored a book. It's a short story collection, 7 short stories.
Okay.
Yeah. The name of the book is Maya, Maya, M-A-Y-A, which means illusion.
Illusion.
So, in which the last chapter or last chapter is basically a metaphorical story of an elephant.
Thank you for the reference.
Okay, Lavanya, we finished the story on your behalf. You'll have to watch the recording.
I will do that.
Great. Okay, well, I think we should end the session. Now, I suggest for next week, of course, you can look through any of the readings at that webpage, 215.html, but I recommend especially that we look over and go over a little bit basic ideas about story and storytelling before we go further into the therapy and personality development. Let's really review story and storytelling. There's a 20-page booklet that I give out in my ordinary storytelling workshops, and there's a link to it on that 215.html. It says something like story and storytelling. I'll send the direct link also by email. So again, I suggest people look through it and maybe copy anything that looks interesting, paste it into a word processing file, and then we can discuss it together. I guess when we get really advanced, we'll learn how that we can all colorize the same file. I can color parts blue, somebody else can color it red, but for now, I think I don't know how we can do that. So let me stop recording, and then we'll actually say goodbye to each other. May I stop recording now?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.